Our next storyteller is an Earlham grad who fell in love with Richmond and stayed. You probably know him as the mastermind and coordinator of the Richmond Farmers Market. Please welcome to our stage, Caleb Smith.
Hi, all. Is this thing on? Okay, so I grew up originally in New Hampshire on the East Coast, and growing up I did a lot of hiking and backpacking, canoeing, was always out and about in the woods whenever I could be. And when I graduated from high school, which was with a lot of friends who had also had similar upbringings in hiking and camping and backpacking, we all decided that we wanted to do a big hiking trip on our own, like we'd always been hearing about from our teachers, our mentors, other people on hiking trips, our parents, things like that. And we had just graduated, and we knew that we needed to prove to the world that we were adults. And that no parents, no teachers hike seemed like the perfect way to do that. So the wilderness had called, and we had to answer. And so, you know, it wasn't just a hike, but it was really a coming of age thing for us, I think. And we decided that to really prove ourselves, we needed to hike the highest mountain in the country. Well, that turned out it's in Alaska, so we settled on the contiguous 48, which is Mount Whitney. It's located in the High Sierra of California. So we decided that we would hike the John Muir Trail, which is a grueling 211-mile hike that starts in Yosemite Valley and ends at Mount Whitney. And something we didn't realize at the time was that there was a lot of behind-the-scenes things that our parents, our teachers had all done to make those hikes work. And that was all pretty essential. So, me, my friend DJ and Alan, our friends Oriana and Sophia, we all met up in Denver, and we set off on a set of trains and planes and automobiles and buses that it's a story of its own, but we made it to Yosemite Valley. And we explored for a day, and then we headed back by bus to our campground at Tuolumne Meadows, which was a much cheaper campground, about an hour and a half outside of Yosemite, which was great, but we ran into our first hiccup. We had failed to realize that our campground was 25 miles in on the trail that we had decided we needed to hike to prove ourselves as adults, as members of society, all of that. So by camping there, we hadn't planned enough time to do that extra hike. We had decided that we needed to spend some extra time getting ready and things like that, but we decided to do it anyways. So we didn't get off to an auspicious start, that's for sure. So on our first day, we decided that to prove ourselves, we, and by we I mean the boys of the trip, needed to do the first 25 miles. We needed that sense of completion. We'd done the whole 211 miles of this trail. We had finished it all. The girls didn't care, and that probably should have been our first sign that it wasn't that big of a deal. But anyways, we woke up, or we decided that we would take a bus to the valley first thing in the morning, and we would do a day hike of this 25 miles. Not a big deal. And it left at 10 in the morning. It was the first one we could take, and we overslept and missed it. So that wasn't a big deal. We could just hitchhike. Our first friend, Alan, got a ride real easy, but moving on, me and DJ, we couldn't get a ride. And then, all of a sudden, out of seemingly nowhere, this wizened old lady covered in dirt, head to toe, who looked like she'd been living in the wilderness since before time, appeared and said, "You need to go down there, that's where they'll pick you up." And she was right, and about 5 minutes later, a very nice German tourist picked me and my friend DJ up, and we went on down to Yosemite Valley. And we stopped along the way, we took some pictures with the redwoods with our new friend, and by the time we got down into the valley and said goodbye to our new friend and met up with the rest of our team, it was already 12:30 in the afternoon. And we knew that we needed to get going, so we set off. You know, it was no big deal. We didn't have full packs on. We were young, energetic teenagers. And so we decided that, we could do it. No big deal. So we felt like we were making great time. We were flying past all these tourists. We were just going. We passed all these beautiful waterfalls. But we slowly started realizing that a 25-mile hike with a 10,000-foot climb wasn't actually a day hike, believe it or not. So we planned it as a day hike. We brought water filters, a warm layer for each of us, and a few emergency supplies, and some peanut butter and tortillas. So we kept hiking. We still were pretty optimistic. We were shooting on by people left and right, and we stopped seeing so many people. And it started to get dark, and we started noticing that people were setting up their camps for the night. At one point, we passed this nice, very well-equipped family who it looked like they were doing their first overnight hike. And the dad called out to us. He said, "You boys all right?" And we had a choice at that point. We knew we could say, no, we're not all right. We are in way over our heads, but this was our chance to prove ourselves, and this was our first real test. So we said, "Yeah, we're doing great. Just headed up to the meadows." And his eyes widened, and he opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but we just shot on past and kept going. So quickly our day hike turned into a night hike, and we were 3 teenagers in the middle of the woods in the Sierra Nevadas, and we realized another problem, which was that our emergency supplies were only 1 flashlight and 1 lighter that I had bought that morning as sources of light. So our last 10 or 15 miles of the hike, we have no idea how long we were hiking in the dark. We're lit by Alan in the back with the headlamp, which batteries were dying, and me in the lighter, with the lighter in the front, flicking the flint every 5 seconds, taking a snapshot of what the trail looked like so I could memorize the way forward over the rocks. So we arrived back at 2 a.m., finished our first day of hiking, and for some reason we were insanely proud of what we had done. But it was, somehow it felt like a little bit of an omen, but we ignored it. And we still thought that we should be hiking Mount Whitney and going along this trail. So our preparation, it got better. There were some things along the way that weren't our fault. One of our friends' food shipments didn't arrive, and so for our last 10 days, 5 people shared 4 people's worth of food, which led to some interesting conversations, more like arguments, really, about what the best Subway sandwich is, some other things like that. Another one, I called my parents for the first time in 2 weeks. I was 17, I'm still a minor. They were still my guardians. First time in 2 weeks I talked to them, standing on top of a 13,000-foot pass where I'd gotten cell reception. I called them, and it's ringing, and finally, as I connect, we notice a storm rolling in the distance, and there's lightning cracking and all sorts of fun stuff. And so I say, "Hi, I'm alive, gotta go," and take off. There were some other interesting or bad omens, like the time I almost got hit by a falling weather balloon, but that's another story. But finally, after about 20 days on the trail, we were at the foot of Mount Whitney, and we'd learned a lot of lessons about independence and adulthood, and yet we were still not starting up the 14,496-foot peak until late afternoon. But we'd made it. We were there, and by God, we wanted to be able to spend some time and see the sunset, see the stars, and the sunrise from the top of the world, actually and figuratively. But, so we also hadn't realized that most people don't camp on top of the tallest peak in the contiguous 48. For obvious reasons, wind, cold, there's nowhere to stake a tent. But, and so most people would camp at a base camp and wake up at pre-dawn and then head to the summit for sunrise if they wanted to do that. But we had a bad track record at waking up early at that point. So up we went, and we made it to the top just as the sun set. And there was a small hut on top where we met a few other people who were just as foolish as us. But there was only enough room for 3 of us, for 3 of our group to sleep inside. So me and my friend DJ decided to pitch a tent in the only place on top of the whole mountain where you could fit a 2-person tent. But with the way the wind was blowing and the temperatures were dropping, we decided we needed to share a sleeping bag. And we were pretty progressive, open-minded teenagers. But 2 teenage boys was still sharing a sleeping bag was still interesting, and it was an experience for both of us. And we didn't get much sleep because we were kicking each other so much. But that actually worked in our favor because we woke up pretty easily, and me and some of my closest friends from high school were able to huddle together and watch from the highest point in the contiguous 48 as the sun rose over from the east over the United States. So we had done it. We hightailed it down the mountain at that point. We were thrilled to return to civilization. And we split our last protein bar in those last few hours on the trail as our rations had all but run out at that point. And as we were hitting those last few switchbacks, going down the trail, chattering excitedly about all the food we were going to eat, hamburgers, Subway, noodles, carbs. I stopped to think for a moment, and I had begun to realize that adulthood wasn't just about being prepared, but figuring it out as you go. And luckily, before I had too many earth-shattering revelations, I found the thing that I'd been wanting more than anything else that whole trip, which was a vending machine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. And I didn't say thanks again to Jerry. It's good to have the sub-theme of dubious hitchhiking experiences, hiking and hitchhiking experiences. So let's clap again for Caleb and Jerry. So that was awesome.